Yeah, so I think today we said that we were going to start looking at Spring Boot. We did a session a little while back, just like what's Spring Boot, what's going on here, what maybe do I need to know before I start diving into it. That's great. Now we're going to start getting our hands dirty. So, like I said, I'm going to be making this project and starting to build on it over time. So maybe like the next 2, 3, 4 sessions, we'll just be taking wherever we leave off on this project and continuing to build on top of it and adding more and more ideas, because basically no project that you're ever going to be on is really just like one thing. It's like a combination of 7 different things that you really need to kind of integrate together. And we want to represent that appropriately instead of just being like, hey, here's this thing in a vacuum that you'll never be able to use exactly how I did it. So feel free to join along if you want. I did throw the repo in the chat. If anyone wants to use it, let me throw it in there one more time, just because I know some people probably joined afterwards. There you go. But yeah, you can download that and follow along if you want to. All you really need is Java 21. So we talked a little bit about spring.start.io earlier. So let me go there again if my keyboard will cooperate with me. And the pro tip is do start.spring.io instead of spring.start.io, because one of them is correct. All right, so we're at Spring Initializer here. So just to kind of show you what I did to create this project that you see right here. If we go to our build Gradle, we can see some of the things we put in. But it looks like this. We are using Groovy. Yes, we are using the Groovy Gradle, I believe. There's the Kotlin DSL one as well. Both of them are basically the same. I know some people have strong feelings on the Kotlin one. Jake is one of them. I love Kotlin, but I haven't really noticed a huge difference between these two. Language, we're doing Java because this is the Java COP. Go us. Spring Boot, I think we did 3.1.5, but let's double check here. 3.1.4 is apparently what we did. So it might have changed in the couple of weeks since we looked at this last. And then down here, we just have some package information, which we don't really care about right now. We're packaging up as a jar, and then we did opt for Java 21 instead of Java 17. So that's all like the base stuff out of the way. So some dependencies that we added, at least to start us off here with our small amount of things that we want to cover today, which let's take a quick tangent and go look at those. So on our agenda, hopefully today in the next like 40 minutes or so, is create the project and start.spring.io, which we kind of pulled like put it in the oven and pull the one that's already cooked out of the oven situation here. We are going to set up a REST controller. We are going to create some configs, some profiles, and use config injection. We're going to show how auto wiring works and the bean pool. And then we are going to stretch goal here, call another REST service using the web client API. So to start out with, let's go get some libraries that actually help us do those things, because that's what that's why they're there. So first things first, we have Spring Boot Starter Web and Spring Boot Starter Web Flux. I talked about these last time, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but Spring Web is what you're going to use to like make REST and like HTTP services. It's fairly straightforward. And then reactive or Web Flux. Web Flux. Oh, reactive web. There we go. That's the name right there. This one is a different version of web that has the reactive libraries in it, which we are not going to take advantage of right now. The only reason we're grabbing it is for the web client package, which is going to allow us to call out to other things. Web client basically replaces the old REST template setup in Spring Web. Again, we'll dig into that a little bit more when we actually get to it. I don't want to spend too much time on it right now. After that, we grabbed Lombok because we are good people. Lombok is a developer tool. It doesn't actually do anything in production, but it will make it where we can cut down some of the boilerplate Java code. I'll show you how that works in a second as well. We got our Spring Boot configuration processor, which is just a little helpful dev tool as well. Configuration processor. This is just going to help with when you're in your config and your YAML files, be like, oh, hey, this is a property I already know about, and this is what it should look like. There's Lombok again, once as a like compile time thing and once as an annotation processor. And then you also have Spring Boot Starter Test for testing and Reactor Test for, I believe that's part of the WebFlex library. And that's it. We're pretty stripped back right now to just a couple of like nice to have dev things and then like our web packages, and that's it. So before we go into start like actually implementing and kind of taking a tour of what we downloaded here, any questions at all? All right, cool. Let's do it. So start.spring.io generated this whole thing as a zip for us. I just took the zip and I opened it in VS Code and I like did a build at one point, I think. And you can see that we have some build artifacts right here. Coming down, let's see what we kind of get out of the box. We get a git ignore. Everyone's pretty familiar with that. We get a readme. Everyone's actually, I don't even think we get a readme. I made the readme. We get a help.md that I've gotten rid of because we don't really need it. And then the big things that you get out are the build.gradle, which has all of the packages you've kind of asked for, plus some other kind of setup stuff. And then you get the Gradle wrapper. So if you're not super familiar with Maven and Gradle, they're the dependency managers for Java. There might be others, but these are the main two by far. However, not all people already have Maven or Gradle installed. The Gradle wrapper is just a nice little script. It's like, hey, go install a version of Gradle for you and use that locally. So that's what we have here. And then we also have the Gradle wrapper jar that is accomplishing that for us. So you don't want to get rid of those, even though they look a little bit suspicious when you first download them. And then you have your settings.gradle, which usually just has a project name in it. And that's it for like the stuff that's not code. For the stuff that is code, let's dig in a little bit. We have a main directory. So you have Java, COM, SAI, Spring Boot example. That is the name of our kind of project here. And then you get a Spring Boot example application or whatever it is that you named it set up. And you know, I'm a little confused why it's. No?
Yeah.
Why are you so confused, buddy?
Hmm.
We'll just do a build and we'll see what happens. So we have our Spring Boot example application, which just has spring application.run. You're pretty much never going to touch this. This is going to be what this looks like all the time. And then it has an at Spring Boot application annotation on top. This is just your base, like, hey, when I start up, this is my main that I go into. It starts my Spring Boot application, creates all my context, starts all my Beanpool stuff. Again, you don't really need to touch it. It's there. You're good. The only other thing you see in here is inside resources. We have some static stuff. We're not going to use any of that, so I'm just going to delete it. And we have some templates. If you were using like Timeleaf or any kind of UI type library, those would be helpful. We're not going to use those either. And you have your application.properties. This is your first and most important thing that you can do when you do download this is you can take your application.properties and rename it to application.yaml. And now you're set up for success. I'm pretty opinionated on this. It really doesn't matter that much. I like YAML because typically when I'm setting up my configurations, I'm setting them as objects and I'm injecting them into objects. And YAML is a framework that actually lets you create objects instead of creating like weird one-off property strings. So we'll get into that a little bit more later as well. There's a lot of fun out of the box things you can do with Spring and configurations. We won't dig into those too much today. So now I think the next thing up on our list here is actually creating a REST controller. So before we start writing code, everyone good? Any thoughts? So at least one thumbs up. I take it. Multiple thumbs up. They're all
There we go. Yeah.
okay. So let's go ahead and you can organize things 1,000 different ways. I'm just going to create a controllers directory or package here. And then we are going to create a new class called test controller. Why not? Or we'll call this like main controller. Java. All right. This sets up the public class for us because this is Java and we must do that. I'm not sure. Okay, that's fine. I don't care. So this controller, the first thing that you want to do when you come in here is you want to give it an annotation because this is Spring Boot. And are we still having troubles with?
I'm not wondering if it's a Java 21 VS Code thing.
I wonder if it
No.
is. It definitely worked earlier. I was fairly certain.
You could flip to 17 quick and see if it just
I could. That's true.
makes it happy to get you going.
Did
Okay, let's
you
do that.
have you? I also wonder, since you're using Gradle, I wonder if you need to resolve your dependencies in VS Code.
That does happen sometimes. Oops. No. Here.
You might also need the Gradle extension. I thought you would have had it.
Let me reload project and see what happens.
Turn off and back on. That always works.
Configuration.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. It is angry about Java 21, which makes no sense.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. We'll go to 17 for now. We're not really leveraging any 21 stuff.
Yeah.
All right, let's do a Gradle build again. Or GW. I have a Gradle wrapper as an alias, just called GW in my setup here. So you know. Okay. 17's working. This is still unhappy. Fine. I did set the answers always. Configure Java runtime. Why are you doing this?
Hmm.
And if I say 17 and it does actually do the thing, I'm going to do one last Hail Mary here. Okay. It decided to not even like register that as okay, fine.
It's never about building an application. It's always
No.
about getting the runtime to work with the application you built.
That's the truth.
Java.
Probably one of those pieces of software that detects you're sharing your screen and decides not to work.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's fair. That's probably what's going on. Okay, it
It-
looks a little less angry now.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, there we go.
Oh, fun.
Let's run with it. I'm happy.
Yep.
All right, so our main controller, we're good now. First thing you want to do inside your main controller is we want to annotate it with something that lets us know that this is going to be a controller. So if you used REST controller, which is fairly straightforward, it should know, hey, this class, I want to automatically spin up and make an instance of this class that I'm going to house web endpoints on without me having to like tell it to do anything else. The annotation takes care of all of that for us. Next, we're going to make a get endpoint that we just want to return. Let's say hello world. This is a programming tutorial for all. So we're going to say get mapping as an annotation, and then we're going to give it a path. So you say path equals, and then I'm just going to say hello. And it'll be slash hello, I believe.
Yep.
Then this is going to annotate a method. So we are going to say public string, because we are returning a string. Nope, that's not what that should be. There we go. Public string and hello. We need to accept no parameters. And then we are just going to return hello world. All right. Looks pretty solid to me. We don't really need to do anything else. This is it. The other thing that would be nice, so I'm going to add this here, is a response status. So this will be the happy path response status. So if you have things that are like creating objects and you want to return like a created or something else, there are ways you can wrap that object in like a response wrapper that Spring allows you to use. Or if it's fairly simple and straightforward, you can just use this response status. And I believe it is HTTP status dot okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm doing all of this from memory from like months ago, so I apologize if I get some of this wrong out of the bat here. So let's run our boot run. So we're using Java wrapper, or sorry, the Gradle wrapper, and we say boot run.
Hey, Gray, where would you define the wrapper as? At?
The wrapper. So I can show you that in just a second here. What you would do is instead of returning a string, you would return a response wrapper object that is a generic that has a string inside.
Response entity, I think.
Response entity. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I should have been specific. When you started the app, you had GW.
Oh, you're talking about the alias?
Yes, the alias, yes.
Oh, yeah. That's in my Bash RC for Linux.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So if I go make a new HTTP request here, it doesn't really matter what collection it's in. We're going to go to localhost /colon 8080/hello. All right. Hello world. Look at us. We're programmers. We know what's going on. Can I make this bigger? I can. Excellent. Is that a little bit easier to read?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so going back to our app, you can see that everything's started up. You can look, there's the fancy little banner here. And then you can see a few things about what port it started on. So Tomcat initialized with port 8080. Tomcat is the default server built into normal Spring Web. There's a different type of server that's in the reactive web. So you know that we're not using the reactive one, even though we have that library, because it says that Tomcat initialized. And that's Apache Tomcat, in case you're not familiar with the server itself. Then down here, you can see that we started Spring Boot example application in however many seconds. This is like the magic log. This is the one you're always looking for and hoping for when you're trying to do your deploy. This is the one that lets you know you're in probably good shape anyway. So we have our first REST controller. Everything looks really great there. Adamo, did you actually want to look at the response entity thing, or was that just a me thinking that you were talking about something else? Nope. Okay, cool. We'll keep going. So get mapping, hello, we're good to go there. You can also, so you know, put the path for REST controller stuff up in the REST controller as well, and it will be a prefix for everything in the in here, and that actually might not be on REST controller. It might be on a slightly different one called like mapping or something along those lines.
Mapping or something.
Request mapping. At request mapping.
Yeah.
And you put a path here. You basically give it all the stuff I have right here. There we go. And now to get here, let's just double check that we actually know what's going on. If we do this, we should see that we have to call /hello/hello to get our endpoint, which if I do this, I should get nothing, not found, great.
Yep.
/hello, send, I'm good to go. So this is really nice if you have a bunch of endpoints around like one specific thing here, like for teammate directory that I've been working on, like teammates as a request mapping, and then you have a bunch of other stuff underneath. So I'm going to get rid of that for right now because we don't care about it. And let's go look at our list of things we wanted to do again, which, because I had to restart VS Code, is now gone. But that's okay, because I think I remember what it was. We were going to start looking at some configuration setup. So remember how I said that we had this really important thing where we made this a YAML instead. Perfect. We're going to come in here and we're going to make some custom configurations, and then we're going to see the best ways to get those configurations and then have them interact with our REST service. And right now we're just doing the get REST service. If you guys want to dive into some other kinds of REST services, we can, but it might be better to wait for those until we have some kind of persistent layer that we can save to and use going forward, like when we hook up a database or something. So here we're going to say like greetings as an object name. That is not how you spell greetings. There we go. And then we are going to say like default, like our default custom greeting of some kind. And we're just going to make this a string. And we're going to say hello Java COP. Sound good? Now this is being obnoxious and doing 4 spaces. We're going to make it do 2 really quick because we're not monsters. All right. So now there are a few different ways that you can do this, and I'll kind of go through some of the options for you. Option number 1, which I've never really used and I don't love, is we are going to leverage some of those default items in the bean pool for Spring that start up for you. So if I wanted to, I could say @autowired, which means, hey, I'm expecting there to be something in the bean pool that is of this class. I'm going to look for environment, which is an object that is available in Spring automatically for you. It spins one up and puts stuff in there. I'm going to call it env. And then I can come down here, and instead of returning hello world, I'm going to say env dot get property. And then we're going to give it the string that we just specified in our application.yaml, which is greetings.default. All right, so now if we kill this and run it again, come here, get rid of our second hello, send, we should see hello Java COP. Excellent, look at us go. Now, again, this is not something I've ever seen anyone do in a real one because there are like 3 other ways to do it that are all a little bit easier than bringing in the entire environment object that you don't want. So we're just going to get rid of it. Well, actually here, instead of getting rid of it, we're going to change this to be something else. The other way that I see people use the most probably is the @value annotation. The @value annotation lets you pass in value that is like interpolated against your configurations. So if I put this greetings.default inside of a $ curly bracket up in my annotation, what it's going to do is try and set this for me. Default greeting in here. And then I'm just going to use this instead. All right, let's give that a try and see if it works. And it does. So we get the same response back. All right. This, like I said, is what I see people use most of the time. I don't love it, even though it is totally valid, and I've seen big projects that use it, and they are able to live their lives just perfectly fine. But I don't like leveraging the strings as much. I like to kind of cut down on like specifying a string that should match up with a specific thing as much as possible. And you have to do this for every single thing. So if I made like 17 other greetings in here, I would then need to come in here and make like 17 other items in here and put a value on each of them to reference it. Now, there are ways around that, but just like if you're using this at face value, that's kind of what you end up going for. I want to show you the way that I like to do it a little bit more. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make a new folder, and we're going to call it like configs or something along those lines. And then in here, we're going to make a new file, and we're going to call this greetings config.java. All right. In greetings config, what we want to do is we're going to use a couple of magic annotations. The first one we're going to say is configuration. Now, this is not necessarily going to be used the way it normally is. We could just use an @component here, and there's a whole slew of different annotations that are just basically you telling Spring Boot, hey, I want you to make a one instance of this class and throw it in my bean pool for me automatically. If I did not put @configuration here, it would not know to do that. It would just think, oh, greetings config is a class that exists as a definition. Maybe I'll make a few during the life cycle of my application, but it won't make one for me. The base version of this, which you see a lot, is component. But there are a few specific ones that have like some additional things built in, like the REST controller one we saw before. Or if you come here and you say configuration, then it knows that one, it needs to make it, and two, you can also define beans in this class as methods that will then be reused. We're not going to dig into that as much right now, but that's why this one's slightly different. The other one on here is configuration properties. And this is going to be what lets us build those configuration objects that I was talking about before. So if I look and I say greetings, but spell it correctly. Yeah. All right. If I look and I say greetings, then what it should do is look in this path, and this can be like a whole dot location path where you can drill in if you wanted to. It'll look at this path and it will find it in your configurations. So it'll go to the greetings path, and then it will try and make an object based on what this object is in your properties. So it would expect, it's not going to fail if I don't have it, but it would expect that I have a string called default in my class definition now. I'm going to go to greetings config and I'm going to make that. So we will say private string default. My keyboard is just having a day. Okay.
Default might be
Default might be a little bit angry. We'll see.
yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're gonna change the name of default to be main or main greeting. That might also be another word that we can't use. We'll see. No, we're good. Okay. So greetings, main. The only other thing that you need to keep in mind, especially when you're using a lot of Spring Boot stuff, is if you're familiar with the concept of getters and setters in Java, which we've covered a little bit in some of our old settings or our old meetings, is that right now there is no method to set main on our greetings config. There are some ways that you can leverage constructors, and there are some ways that you can leverage getters and setters behind the scenes in Spring to be able to set this stuff. A lot of the time, because no one's going to change a config object, I do just end up throwing an at data annotation, which is one of those Lombok annotations that generates all the getters and setters for me. This is not what you want to do 100% of the time. If you have a configuration you want to make sure cannot be changed, there are ways to do that, but it's a little bit more setup. If anyone remembers how to do that off the top of their head, we can definitely do that right now. I've done it a few times and it's been helpful, I suppose, but not something that has been super necessary doing this stuff a lot of the time. So the reason we're doing this is so there is a setter, a set main behind the scenes that accepts a string. So when we create this app or this greetings config object in the background, it has a way to set the main variable when we do this. It might be using a constructor behind the scenes. It might be using those setters behind the scenes. Things are moving more and more to constructor injection as much as they can as time goes on. So, all right, let's kill this. And what we need to do here is take our greetings config object. And if we come back to our main controller, instead of doing this, we're going to say at autowired again, because we're expecting to get something that's registered in our bean pool. We're going to give it the class of the thing we want to grab. And then we're just going to say config right now. And we need to make sure this is imported. Then come down here and we're going to say get our config object. And now we can, oh my goodness, we can treat this thing as an actual Java object and get everything off of it that we care about. So config.getMain should give us the exact thing that we want. Start this back up, which we do. Excellent. So it's making all this stuff for us just to kind of show you what might happen if you don't do some things. So this at configuration right here that I said registers it and puts it in the Spring Boot bean pool for us. If we don't put that there, it has no idea. And it is angry at me because I'm trying to auto wire something right here. And by default, if you're trying to auto wire something, it counts it as required. And it's saying, hey, I tried to make a main controller, but there was no greetings config in the bean pool for me to go grab. So I'm just going to die, which I appreciate because I don't want to wait until my code's executed for me to know that there's a problem. So that's what we have here. And this is main. This can work for all sorts of different things, not just strings. You can auto-wire maps. You can auto-wire sub-objects. Sorry, and by auto-wire, I mean you can do the config injection for maps, strings, subobjects, ints, all that kind of stuff. Here's the other really fun thing is because you are treating this as an object, you get all of the fun benefits that Java gives you that you can do on objects, like being able to do validation on things. So let's take this and say we have a private int, like num of people that we're greeting. I don't really know. All right, so it's going to be an integer. We're going to come over here. We're going to show two pieces of magic. One is I put num of people before, which is great. We're going to say one, and then I'm going to come over here and we're going to say get num of people, and we're going to change this to return an int instead. So we should get back a one, which makes sense. That's not super impressive. And we do. Excellent. But the fun thing is this does conversions for types of strings for you. So I can have num of people in camel case like this, or I can do it in underscores, and it doesn't care. It will just set it up for me right away and do that automatic conversion. Some people really like having their properties only set up like this or with dashes, like having kebab case instead. So you can appease them if they are like that. Every project's different, but just know that you don't need to account for that. You can just do it here and it knows how to convert that for you. I've rarely ran into any kind of problems, and you pretty much know right away because your thing doesn't inject the way you think it would. But here's the cool thing. I can take this guy now and I can start using some of the out of the box validation library things. So I can say min. Oh, and are they not out of the box anymore? There might be a validation library I need to grab really quick. Is it Java X now or Jakarta now? It's Jakarta.
It went to
Validation.
Jakarta.
Yeah. Do I want this one? I think I want this one. Yeah. 302. There's usually a snippet you can grab, right? Where's my little snippet?
You have to click a version first, and then it'll.
Oh, do I? Thank you. Beautiful.
There you go.
Okay. All right. We go back to our build Gradle. We throw it in here. We save. We should just be able to put this all as one string as well, but whatever, it's fine right now. All right, now if I go back to my greetings config after this thing finishes, which it's struggling right now for some reason. Let's see if it did what we needed it to do though. If I say @min, we still don't have it. Okay, we might have to wait on the validation library stuff. Also, I might as well just do this while I'm here. Right, or do I? This is a. Do I need this? Here's the other thing that we can do if we want to, is we can come back here to Spring Initializer. We can
Yeah.
look for the validation,
Yep.
which does exist, and then we can say explore and just go to our build.gradle and look for what it grabbed for validation. Oh, there's a Spring Starter validation.
There we go.
Let's just grab that instead. You guys are getting the raw experience. This is-
Yeah.
Okay, it's yelling at me again, but let's see. Okay, there we go. We're good now. So we have an @min annotation that we can add here. So let's say this is a minimum of 1 that's allowed. This is a non-negative number, or a it's got to be a positive number. Then we come here and let's say max. Like an example of a situation you might use this on is the SQS library. Only allows you to consume like up to 10 at a time when you're doing it. And often that is something you want to throw in a config. However, if someone puts in one that doesn't work, you won't really know until it tries to consume that it broke. So if you throw one of these in here, you know that whoever, like your app is just not going to start up at all if someone tries to configure this out of what it's allowed to be. So if I start it up right now, everything should be good because we do have it set as 1. Send. We're still at 1. Excellent. If I go back here and we change this guy to be a 0 instead, we should see that nothing happens. And this is a gotcha. If you want to use this validation library, you do have to come up here and you have to say @validated. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so binding to target, find exception failed, properties under greetings, and you can see that the greetings num of people value 0 must be greater than or equal to 1. So pretty straightforward, tells you exactly what's going on, and you're good to go. So now I go in here and I'm like, man, that was a mistake. I'll never do that again. So that is configuration injection. You can leverage this a lot of different ways, but this is a fairly straightforward just example of like, hey, this is possible, so go do stuff with it. That's really all I was going to cover on config right now. I do go a little bit more in depth in a technically speaking that we did a while back if you want to know more about that stuff, but I don't want to just rehash that the whole time. So any other thoughts on this before we move on to our next thing? So I think the next thing we had, oh, thank you. Yeah, typically you would call Gradle run, boot run. Thank you, Jacob. Previously lost agenda items. We did rest controller. We did config profiles. We haven't done profiles. Let's leverage those. Excellent call. So I have this application.yaml over here. This is what's going to load by default for me, which is great. So if I go and I take this and I make a copy of it, we can start leveraging profiles, which is really nice. So I'm still going to have application, but I'm going to add a profile name to the end of it. So in this case, we're going to make a profile called Kyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. All right. So the nice thing about these, some people don't like it, I like it a lot, is they are layers, and you can specify multiple profiles when you run something. So application Kyle, if I come here, I don't need to set greetings in main and num of people. In fact, if I just commented this whole thing out and I ran in the Kyle profile, everything would be fine. It would just grab all the default values from application YAML for those. However, if I wanted to, let's take greetings main and change it to hello Kyle instead. All right, our num of people will still remain the same at 3. And then we're going to go back to our main controller here, and let's just go ahead and make another one of these guys. We're going to call this people. We're going to call this hello. We'll change this back to get main, so we get our greeting that we talked about earlier, and then we'll change this back to a string because that's what we're returning. All right, so now people. Excellent. So if I were to run this normally, so I'm not running in Kyle mode right now. If you go here, I can see hello gives me a hello Java COP, and I can see people gives me 3. Come back here, kill it, and there are a few different ways to do this. You can pass it as command line arguments, but there's an environment variable that you can use as well, and it's called Spring Profiles Active, which always gets me, and it is a comma delimited list of the profiles you want to use. So I'm going to say Spring Profiles Active Kyle, and then I am going to do my Gradle boot run. And you can see when you do that, the one following profile is active, Kyle. Now, going to here, this we don't expect to change. This is still 3 because it's grabbing that default one from the layering. And then if I go to hello, you can see that we greet Kyle instead of the Java COP. We have priorities. So that is how kind of our layering and our profiles are set up. I'm going to do one more thing here. So we're going to say, this is application party. And we're going to say that because instead of replacing main, we're going to replace num of people, which it thinks is kebab case now. Sure, that's fine. And we're going to say that this is 10, the maximum amount of people you can have at a party, apparently. We're going to kill that. And if I were to run it as just Kyle, so here's our expectations. We run with no things, we get hello Java COP and 3. We run with Kyle, we get hello Kyle and 3. We run with just party, we get hello Java COP and 10. But if we run with both of them, because they are comma delimited, I can say Kyle and party. Then it should replace both of these things, and we're not using the defaults at all anymore at this point. So hello still gives me hello Kyle, and people gives me 10. So leveraging multiple profiles at the same time is something I don't see people do a lot in Spring Boot that I think is very powerful. It's also really nice to be able to like remain dry in a lot of your configurations, but just be careful with how many layers you set up. You just need to approach it well, and you need to make sure your team has full buy-in because a lot of people don't like it, and they will not be happy with the setup there. But like one way to do this is like if you deploy to AWS a lot, or you could deploy to multiple different locations that all have to have similar things, but not all exactly the same. You can set up a layer that's like, here's my AWS profile, and here's prod. So I would launch it in AWS prod configuration, and then I wouldn't have to like set all those AWS things up for every single environment I'm going to deploy to in AWS. But they also won't be what's running locally, which is nice. I prefer to not have an application dash local. A lot of people prefer to have an application dash local. That's preference. I prefer just all of my local settings to be an application.yaml because I want it to be that if someone comes in and does a run and doesn't specify a profile, they're safe and they're not hurting anything. And I found ones where it's like, hey, we make our default application YAML like geared towards dev, and then we have a local one that we are using to set up our local variables. And if you don't run in that local profile, you can cause problems. And I've run into that before. I don't like it. So this is the way, this is why I always do this. But again, that's not really a hard and fast rule. That's just a preference thing. All right. And I think auto wiring we talked about a little bit, but we're kind of getting at time here. I don't think we're going to have time to do the web client stuff. That's an easy thing for us to bump to next time, especially because we started a little bit late. This was all fairly basic, straightforward stuff, but are there any questions or are there any things that this sparks questions about that we maybe want to dive into deeper in like another session at some point?
Well, great. I definitely have a question for you. I don't know if you can see this. So just to make sure I understood that layering the config file. So what you did with the party, if this were to be my main, can you see anything?
I can, yep.
I have 3 business cards here.
Okay.
So this is main, this is party, and this is Kyle. So it's gonna like it when you did that hello, it picked 10 instead of 3 because it needs to go through like everything else before the main.
Yeah, think about it this way. Think about it as if this were like a JSON object. That if I have right here, I'm just going to make a JSON object and we'll say this was, so this is the greetings object. No, here, we'll actually do greetings here. And then this itself is also an object that has main, and it has num of people, right?
Mhm.
So that's what our JSON object of our settings looks like, if you want to think about it that way. What the profiles do is they go through and think of it as like layering one at a time from default up through the last one that you specify in your Spring Profiles active. So what's going to happen is if you think about it as multi-stage, when I run like I did last time with Kyle and Party, the first thing it does is it goes and it grabs the default stuff in application YAML, which is going to be hello Java COP and 3. So let's show that. So it's that and that. So it's going to basically say, this is my default setup. I'm good to go. Then I'm going to go to my next profile that I have and layer anything that exists in that on top of this. So it goes and it looks at Kyle. And so if I look at Kyle, it has greetings main specified. So I go take hello Kyle and replace greetings main with that. Then it's like, okay, do I have any other profiles active? Okay, yep, I have party next. So I'm going to go look at party. I'm going to grab the num of people from party, and I'm going to replace that, except for I'm going to replace it with the number instead of the name. There we go. And I'm going to do that. And then if I wanted to, last thing here is if I replaced Kyle with myself, because narcissism, I can come here, I can say hello gray, and you can see it's kind of a last in wins. Because if I do a Kyle, I do a party, and I do a gray and run it, gray is going to win because gray was specified last in the order of profiles.
Paul, I think you are muted.
Me?
No, sorry. I thought Paul was talking,
Oh,
but
gotcha.
apparently he wasn't talking to us.
All right. So if I say hello, we get hello gray because
Hmm.
the last layer, then when it went through, it was like, oh, I'm at hello Kyle, but because then gray is the next profile, it goes and it looks everything in gray and layers that on top. So you get whatever. It's like a Swiss cheese approach. Like if there are any holes, it won't do those. That was maybe more confusing. Forget I said that. Yeah.
If you're familiar with
If
CSS,
anything, I don't even know what that is. So you're fine.
Okay. All right. All right.
if you're familiar with CSS, think of it as just like specifying something further down in the document with the same like target, like the same element target, and you're just overriding that same property. So if you set display none, display flex, display inline or whatever, inline would win at the end. It's kind of that same thing if you're more familiar with like CSS.
Another way I like to think about it is like think about it like each one like a layer of paint. The last one visible from the surface is the one that gets applied.
Thank you.
Cool. I know it is 4:59. So any other thoughts or questions about stuff that came up here? Again, I know this was a fairly simple thing, and I know that there are a lot of people that have probably already done a lot of this. We'll get into some more of the advanced stuff like OAuth and database integrations and some of the fun stuff you can do with JPA later. But I just wanted us to be able to take this and start building off of it as we go.
I guess just to ask for those that might be newer, was the auto wired like clear to everyone? It might be worth it to show like the long form of doing that to just show like it's basically constructor injection just to like show that.
That's there. Yeah. Do you want to do that right now, or do we want to hit that next time?
You can hit it
I know
next
it is
too.
fine.
Just I thought it might
Okay.
be valuable for newer people
Absolutely.
to see that.
Yep.
Good call.
Yep.
Good call. Mhm.
Agreed.
And one that I would like to see is further down the road, like Spring Security
Hmm.
focused one or whatever. There's a lot in there. I don't know which one will hit, but like the common
There is a lot in there. Yeah, I will probably focus on OAuth 2 when we do that, because that is kind of like if you're making a new project, that's probably what you're going to want to focus on anyway.
Sure.
And using OIDC flow for stuff. But yeah, we'll hit that a little bit more later. Maybe like one or two, probably two after this. We'll probably hit databases first, honestly.
Works for me.
Cool. If anyone thinks of anything else between now and next time, throw it in the channel and we will add it to our list. What I'll probably do is the little Canvas thing in Slack. We can keep like a running list of all of the topics we want to hit during this session in there. And we'll take what we have here and I will go ahead and push it up to the main branch, or maybe to I don't know. Yeah, I'll go to the main branch. Why not? And then we can kind of keep working off of this for next time. If you want to make your own, make your own. But I think besides that, we should be good. Any last thoughts?
I
Well
can't clap
done.
with my lack of dinosaur arms. It's the
They
only
could clap.
thing.
Did they not clap?
It's real rough.
It's
Yeah.
A short clap.
like that's my only disappointment about this. But thanks, Gray.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
There you
You
go.
guys.
Yeah.